Hello all. We are going to see the ER model in DBMS. ER model means entity relationship model in database management system. In database management system, we have different types of entities present in that, and we are going to relate those entities. ER model stands for an entity relationship model. It is a high level data model. It is used to define the data elements and relationship for a specific system. It develops a conceptual design for the database by covering. It is an easy way of design view of data. In ER model, the database structure is quoted as a diagram called entity relationship diagram. Suppose we design a school database. In this school database, the students will be an entity with attributes like address, name, ID, age, etc. The address can be another entity with attributes like city, street name, pin code, and there will be a relationship between them. Here is a pictorial representation of the components of the ER diagram. Here the entity is the student and the attributes are name, address, ID and age. Here the ER model is entirely divided into three: entity, attributes and then relation. Entity, we are having strong entity and then weak entity. Attributes are key attributes, composite attributes, multi-valued attributes and then derived attributes. Under relationship we have one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one and many-to-many. So entity, an entity may be an object, class, person or a place. In the ER diagram, an entity can be represented as rectangle. Consider here the organization as an example: manager. Here employee works for the department. Next one will be the attribute. It is used to describe the property of an entity. Eclipse symbol is used to represent an attribute. Here the ID, age, contact number, name are the attributes of the student. Here student is the entity and ID, phone number, name, age and sex are the attributes of that entity. Next one, key attributes. So key attributes is used to represent the main characteristics of an entity. Here the entity is student and the main characteristics is the ID, that is it acts as a primary key. The key attribute is represented by an ellipse with the text underlined. And then next one will be the composite attribute. An attribute that composed of many other attributes is known as composite attribute. The composite attributes is represented by an ellipse and those ellipses are connected with an ellipse. Here the name is the attribute and that name can be again split into three, like first name, middle name and then last name. Multi-valued attribute. An attribute can have more than one value. These attributes are known as multi-valued attribute. Here the phone number attribute of the entity student can have more than one values, because nowadays there are possibilities having two numbers for each person. Derived attributes. An attribute that can be derived from other attributes is known as derived attributes. It can be represented by a dashed ellipse. A person's age changes over time and can be derived from another attribute like date of birth. By knowing the date of birth of a person, we can calculate the present age of that particular person. Next one will be the mapping constraint. A mapping constraint is a data constraint that expresses the number of entities to which other entity can be related via a relationship set. It is most useful in describing the relationship set that involves more than two entity sets. For a binary relationship set or on an entity set A and B, there are four possible mapping cardinalities. There are one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one and then many-to-many. Here one-to-one, an entity in E1 is associated with most one entity in E2 and an entity in E2 is associated with at most one entity in E1. One-to-many, an entity in E1 is associated with any number of entities in E2. An entity in E2 is associated with at most one entity in E1. So these are the mapping of one-to-one mapping. Third one, many-to-one. So many-to-one, an entity in E1 is associated with most entity in E2 and an entity in E2 is associated with any number of entities in E1. That is called many-to-one. And then many-to-many. Any number of entities in E1 is mapping with any number of entities in E2. That is called many-to-many relationship. Next comes keys. Keys plays an important role in the relation database. It is used to uniquely identify any record or row of data from the table. It is used to establish and identify the relationship between the tables. In student table, ID is used as a key because it is unique for a student. In person table, passport number, license number or PAN number, Aadhaar number, and these numbers are used as a unique identity for the particular person. So here the student ID is the unique key, and then for a person name is the ID key. We can have that passport number, license number, and SN are the primary keys. There are 4 types of keys: primary key, candidate key, super key, and then foreign key. Primary key, it is the first key which is used to identify one and only instance of an entity uniquely. Here employee ID is the primary key of that each and every employee. So these comes the entity relationship diagram. Here the entity is shown by a rectangle and axis is shown by a diamond symbol and attribute will be a ellipse. Here one-to-one is shown between the various entities. Here many to many and many to one and many to many. 4 relationships have been depicted in this diagram. Here a customer wants to order an item, and how the order can be processed is denoted in this diagram. So what is an entity relationship diagram? An entity relationship diagram shows the relationship of entity sets stored in a database. It is a component of a data, and it is a collection of similar entities. These entities can have attributes that define its properties. By defining the entities, their attributes, and showing the relationship between them, the ER diagram illustrates the logical structure of the database. It is used to sketch out the design of a database. So weak entity sets. Weak entity set is an entity set that do not contain sufficient attributes to uniquely identify the entities. In other words, a primary key does not exist for a weak entity set. It contains a partial key called a discriminator. So extended ER features. Here an entity set may include subgrouping of entities. Subgrouping means we are splitting, like we have already seen that a name can be split into first name, last name, and then middle name. So we have to ensure all the attributes of an entity set plus possibly additional attributes. This is called the process of designating subgroups within an entity is called as a specialization. So we are having 2 types of specialization. First one, overlapping specialization, and then disjoint specialization. For an overlapping specialization, 2 separate arrows are used. For a disjoint specialization, a single arrow is used. Thank you.